Hey guys, it's Intricate from AmigaLove.com. Today I've got something really unique and special that I want to share with the Amiga community that has come into my possession, and it is a Developer Edition Amiga. Now this is a machine that was created prior to the retail sale of a single Amiga machine anywhere in the world. Back in 1985, Commodore, like a lot of companies even to this day, sent developer editions to different companies around the world in the hopes that they would develop software and tools for their new Amiga platform. One of the companies that they sent one of these machines to, and it's believed it's somewhere below 700 total machines were ever created. One of the companies that they decided to send one of these machines to was Hewlett-Packard in Colorado. It turns out that there was a gentleman back in 1985 in Colorado by the name of Larry who had been reading about the Amiga coming out soon and was really excited to get his hands on one. Now this was 34 years ago, and so some of the details have been lost to the sands of time. He can't quite remember everything in terms of how he made the connection to Hewlett-Packard. He's always been in technology, and at the time I believe he worked for a phone company. But in any case, he was able to make a connection with a gentleman at HP who had the ability to sell the machine. Larry drove up to that office, they made a deal, and he had in his possession what's called the Developer Edition Amiga. And he was one of the only people on the planet in 1985 to have one in his hands. I mean, think about it. Think about being one of the only people anywhere in the world, and you're the guy, you're the one that has an Amiga in your house. Now, it wasn't like he had a lot of software ready to go, but he could code, and he was into technology, and he really wanted to start to understand the nuts and bolts of this amazing thing that he'd been reading about in the different journals and magazines and newspapers. And of course, he was also a member of a user group up in Boulder, Colorado, where it sounded really Wild West. It wasn't just a Commodore group or just a TRS group or anybody. It was like the whole collection of people. It was just everybody was learning and trying to share information. So he was getting it from there as well. In any case, he held on to that machine, and literally by July of 1985, just a few months later, so this would have been probably somewhere in the range of 3 to 5 months later, the Amiga was available for retail sale, and he instantly went to his computer dealer and bought one. So he then had two of these things. Now the fact is, the Developer Edition, the one that he got, turns out there's more than one version of the Developer Edition. Up to this point, to my knowledge, there's really only one site in the world that has broken one of these down and analyzed it from inch to inch. To their knowledge, there's about 5 of these known to still exist. There's probably more than that. They're just in someone's closet or basement. If that's true, though, this is now the 6th. And my version is different than the one that they analyzed. The technical guts of it are very different than the one that they analyzed. In fact, the one that they took pictures of literally says Velvet on the silkscreen of the motherboard. Mine does not say Velvet, and I believe I understand why, but it's just another piece of history that we're kind of unraveling as we go. I can also say this. I can guarantee that Larry in Colorado is the only owner of this machine prior to HP having it for a few weeks or a few months. And I am now the second official owner of this machine. It's 100% authentic. None of it has been changed. Now, in 1988, Larry did make an upgrade for it because and I think that's totally fair. It was his machine and he wanted to actually use it to get work done, and he installed a quick start ROM upgrade, which allows him to bypass the kickstart disk. So you'll notice that when I turn this on here in a minute, that hey, it didn't ask for the kickstart. Well, it's because he actually made that upgrade himself back in 1988, and it still works, and it works great. So my point is, what you're about to see is 100% real, and it is absolutely different from the Velvet model, but these are both from the developer edition set that went out to various companies around the world. And now I can walk you through the differences. We're going to start with the outside and then work our way in. Come check it out. But first, an introduction is in order. Say hi to the Developer Edition Amiga. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that the plastic itself is actually glossy. It's not matte plastic like all the Amiga 1000s we're used to seeing. It actually has a very noticeable shine and gloss to it. In fact, you can even see my reflection in the plastic. It's very unusual. Sadly, mine's a bit yellowed, and I probably could deal with that if I really cared, but part of me wants to actually just leave this the way I found it and kind of keep it time capsuled. But in any case, really shiny plastic. And the other thing you're going to notice right off the bat, there's no Amiga logo, right? There's no check mark. It actually says Commodore right on the case. That's hilarious. It's so glossy, it's actually making my finger fart. The next piece of this, worth showing since it's already right here, is the keyboard. It's got the Commodore logo instead of the A, the red A that we're used to seeing. And it has the hollowed out version as well. So you get those two guys. In addition, the actual text, the letter forms, they used a black ink on everything. On all of my other Amiga 1000s, and I have a few, they actually use a really dark blue on most of these keys. This is all black. And to that point, the actual color of the case is slightly different. It's a little bit of a different color gray than what we're used to seeing. Also, these seams are totally different. In fact, they're a little stylized. They've got like a little rounded area before it goes and wraps around and then continues on doing the same style on the sides. The regular Amiga 1000 keyboards didn't do that. They were just a flat seam all the way around. This one's got a little bit of pizzazz going on there, which is kind of neat. Another key difference between the Developer System keyboard and a regular Amiga 1000 keyboard is that there's no logo up in the upper right-hand corner. It's totally blank. They didn't even bother to put like an empty square there for a future logo. Total tabula rasa. On the side of the case, it's virtually the same as what we're used to seeing, and the back looks like a carbon copy of what actually went out to retail markets. There's no difference from what I can tell looking at these side by side. The back panel looks identical to me. The one exception to this side of the machine that is different than all of my other Amigas is actually the power switch is reversed. Usually you pull forward towards yourself to turn the machine on, and this one you push backward, which is a little strange, but that's the way it is. The funny thing is, though, the actual case, the top, at least with mine, there are no clips. This whole top shell is just loosely put on there and it just comes right off. There's no snapping, there's no clipping. Now, when you take the case off, this is another stark difference. And I'm going to point this out briefly, but on eBay, from time to time, you might see a listing of an Amiga 1000 that has signatures inside, ultra rare. Well, we all know that every single Amiga 1000 that was ever sold, they all had the signatures on the inside. That's the way they were made. The developer edition, this really could use all caps and say ultra rare. The developer edition didn't have any signatures at all. In fact, the little posts where the case would rest onto the screw posts below, they don't even have the little metal grommets. If you flip the developer edition upside down and look at the bottom of it, they didn't actually have serial numbers for these yet. Not production level serial numbers, so they actually printed them out on pieces of paper and taped them to the bottom. It's a little sketch and a little ghetto, but I absolutely love it. And look at this on the left. It looks like a card catalog you might find at the library back in 1985, where it shows of some sort of check-in and check-out for this particular model, which is hilarious. I love it. Now I've taken the top off here and I actually want to show you guys the insides of this machine and why my particular edition of the developer edition is so different than the Velvet. The Velvet one that you see in Austria, those photos show a completely different layout on the motherboard. Mine actually is a lot more like the retail versions that went to market. The chip layouts are in exactly the same place that you would expect, and all of the silk screening is the same. There are only very subtle differences that I can see when I put these side by side, and I've actually put here for you to witness. On the left is a very early Amiga 1000. It was purchased the moment they came out by the same person who purchased the developer edition. So as soon as they came out to retail, he went and got one, and then he had the developer edition. So I have both of those side by side. So this is about as early as you can get for an Amiga that you could buy, next to one that you could never buy normally. And they look almost the same. The main differences are on the motherboard themselves, very subtle changes in the resistors used, the coloration of the resistors you can see are different. Some of the capacitors have been changed when they went to mass market. And there's actually like little, on the production model, you can see little copper tabs all the way around. The developer edition didn't have any of those. These actually are the developer edition custom chips. They're really early revisions of each. For example, the Denise chip, this is actually the serial number for a Daphne. And for the Paula chip, this is actually the release number for the Porsche. So this is actually the developer edition level of chips, but it's not the Velvet layout, which is fascinating. And what that tells me, if you go back and look at the serial number, this particular serial number is 638. The one in Vienna was in the 500s range. My theory is that this is one of the last developer editions created, and they'd already made the swap to the production level release candidate. So they actually, the developer editions were going through a metamorphosis of their own during the time these were being sent to all these various companies. And this, in my opinion, my theory is, this is one of the last developer editions made because it already has the revised motherboard inside it. That is very, very close to what they went to retail with. What's also fascinating about this is that because they went to the newer layout of the motherboard, my developer edition actually has 256K on board, whereas the one in Vienna, actually only had 128, which is what most people assume the developer edition only had. Mine is actually what went to retail. It's got 256, and the front expansion is capable and actually does have a 256 expansion inside it. So this actually is more like a regular Amiga that went to market. It's just in the developer edition clothing, which is completely cool. I can actually use this machine like any of my other Amigas if I wanted to. Well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, to be honest, besides look at it and smile at it all the time. What I'd like to do next is actually power the machine on to show you guys that my version actually works. There's not really anything special to show in that regard, but it does power on. That's asking for the Workbench disk, which is unique to this particular edition, or this system, I should say, because Larry, back in 1988, as I mentioned before, made some modifications, and he installed the DKB Quick Start upgrade, which is totally fine by me. Disk drive still works. Still has that gorgeous sound. She's firing up. I'm just using a typical Workbench 1.3 disk. I'm not trying to go old school here and load up 1.0 or 1.1. Just trying to prove that the thing works. Well, hopefully you haven't decided to go watch a little bit of paint dry by now. These aren't exactly speed demons. There we go. And you can see up here, I believe, that I've got basically less than half a meg because some of that Kickstart got loaded into the RAM. But regardless, this is a half meg Amiga right out of the box. Pretty dang cool, if I do say so myself. So guys, that's the Amiga Development System. I hope you enjoyed looking at that as much as I enjoy looking at that. And I also want to take this opportunity as I conclude these remarks to give a huge shout out to Larry, who reached out to me a couple of weeks ago. I've really enjoyed having multiple phone conversations with him, and I feel like we've become friends as he's explained his history with the machine and with the Amigas. He actually went on to buy an Amiga 3000 back in the day and ran his own little studio for a while there, completely off of Amiga hardware. Very, very cool guy, very, very kind, very generous. Thank you so much, Larry, for everything. And that's it, guys. If you enjoyed this, I hope you'll subscribe, like the video, and if you have some more information that you'd like to share, please feel free in the comments below. I've also attached a link to an article with a lot of the photos that you saw in this video in more detail. You can take a look at that over at amigalove.com. And I have a lot more Amiga videos planned for the near future, so stay tuned. We'll see you next time. Take it easy. Bye-bye.